Hello and welcome, you amazing humans. Welcome to another episode of Mysteries with a History, where I'll take you on a wild ride into the unknown, the strange, and the mysterious. Like you, I have questions. Like you, I want answers. Not just about UFOs, but about all the mysteries that are on the fringe of everyday existence. I'm an explorer, just like you, looking for clues, trying to find commonalities between these bizarre phenomena that have quite literally been plaguing humanity in one form or another since the beginning of recorded history, and in some cases, beyond. I often get asked, what do I believe? What do I believe, Cristina Gomez? And I can only ever answer that I haven't reached any conclusions yet about any of these mysteries. I do, however, have an open mind and intense curiosity. And those are my most important assets. I have a couple of quick announcements before we dive into today's topic. In July, I will be beginning live streaming several nights a week a new show called Club Nocturnal. And it will be in the format of a late night chat show where I'll have guests on and we'll dig away at some of these mysteries we cover in Mysteries with the History, as well as curious items in the mainstream news, reviews on TV shows and documentaries about the UFO topic, and other strange themes. It's going to be a lot of fun. And as always, you'll be part of the conversation in the live chat. Also, just quickly, I want to remind you that I have a Patreon where you can get a lot of goodies and extras by becoming a supporter on my channel and research. Click on the Beacons page, a link below, to find the Patreon link and go check out all the behind the scenes and benefits of becoming a supporter. Like that intro you see at the beginning of this show and of Shifting the Paradigm, I can make that for you and it's awesome. Okay, so tonight we're going to be diving in the deep end of a topic that for many, many years has suffered from the stigma of being a ridiculous side element of the UFO mystery, which many researchers and enthusiasts would rather turn a blind eye to. And that's the alien abduction mystery. And it truly is a mystery with a history. Now, everyone is familiar with some very famous cases like the Whitley Strieber experience, the Travis Walton case, the Calvin Parker, the Charles Hickson case, and the Betty and Barney Hill experience. So I'm not going to cover those, but I will explore some of the parallels between those cases and other lesser known accounts. There's a bunch of accounts I have written for you and a little bit of other interesting little bits and pieces that hopefully we'll be able to cover in an hour. It's a lot of information, so cross fingers that we'll get a lot done. Let's start with an account from 1969, known as the Berkshire Ufo Incident. Have you heard of this case? It's not incredibly popular. Not everyone knows about it, so I'm going to be covering it. But if you know about it, I want to read it in the live chat. So, with this incident, numerous residents of the Berkshire County, Massachusetts, individually reported having seen a UFO on September 1st, 1969. Authorities were at a loss for an explanation, like in most cases, and even in present day. Am I too loud? Let me bring down the volume. So, look, authorities are always lost for words. They never know how to explain it. And if they do explain it, they say it's a drone or a weather balloon, especially during this time period in the 1960s, 1970s. This wasn't a lone sighting induced by sleep deprivation that could easily be dismissed, right? Because it was multiple people saw this. It truly appeared as though something uncanny had occurred. On the evening in question, residents spotted lights above Sheffield in southern Berkshire. Many of the witnesses said that the lights were fitted to an unidentified disc-shaped craft that was maneuvering in unprecedented ways. How many times have we heard that for a lot of crafts that we see in the sky? They're usually disc shaped and they move at speeds that are insane. Insane speeds. So this is a very common thing. Oh, your mic is muted? What? No. Okay, no, we're good. Unmute your mic. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Dun dun dun. Is the mic good? You're not muted. Okay, awesome. So were I muted the whole time I was talking? Because that would have really sucked. Should I start from the beginning? Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's keep going. So many of the witnesses saw this disc-shaped craft that was maneuvering at unprecedented speeds. Some witnesses claimed they lost track of time as they glazed with stunning fascination on the object. Again, this is another factor that's so important. We have missing time and we have a craft that moves at crazy speeds. When numerous residents of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, individually reported having seen this in 1969, they were all shocked. And the fact that multiple people had discussed it amongst themselves was even more shocking. So it really ruled out, again, that it was sleep deprivation or some kind of like hysteria because a lot of people saw it. Thomas Reed was 9 years old at the time, and he was in the car with his mother, his brother, and grandmother that night. The family noticed a group of glowing orbs dash out of the roadside trees. Reed claims that something astonishing happened when heading home, when his family approached the Sheffield Bridge. He says, quote, It came to a stop off the right side of the road. He recalled of the glowing orbs. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. And there was just a weird change in pressure, and it just went dead silent. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud after that. So you have intense quietness to intense loudness soon after of all these creatures, usually at night, that make a lot of noise. Then the family suddenly found itself back in the car, right? Because they never left the car, or did they? But they unexpectedly lost 2 hours of memory. Stranger still, Reed's mother and grandmother had somehow switched seats in the car. How can you explain that to a normal person? Saying, yeah, I was driving, but then I lost 2 hours of time and now my grandma's driving and my mom's not driving. When we got in the car, my mom was driving. My grandma was sitting in the passenger seat. How do you explain that? That's pretty weird. So, despite any tangible evidence of the Berkshire UFO incident, Reed has remained steadfast in his account. He stays strict to his story that this really happened in 1969. He said over time, his family regained some memory of the incident, including having been a hangar-like facility with other people. He says, we encountered something, said Reed. It was definitely not of this world. This hangar thing, it was huge. It was larger than a football field. This hallway we saw was circular with Y configuration, almost to control the flow of traffic. This one room had bowed in walls that was rounded. This isn't a typically normal infrastructure in a lot of buildings. But in this case, he remembers it very clearly, even though he was only 9 years old. It's important to remember that Reed was only one of dozens of people who reported witnessing a UFO that night. Some were adults who called into the local radio station to report the sighting, which I always love those. Others were children who began drawing UFOs in class. So you have a range of people, not just adults, not just kids. You're having both ones that are talking about it on the radio and kids that are drawing it. You can't just tell kids to draw what you tell them to. They let their creativity draw for themselves. They let it create on paper. And a lot of times, especially with younger kids, if you've seen a lot of cases through psychology, kids draw what they're feeling or memories. Sometimes it is imagination, but when multiple kids are drawing the same thing, usually it does rule out imagination, and it can instead lead onto the side of memory or some kind of encounter that multiple people witnessed. So there must have been between 20 or 30 sketches that were drawn by the children in our fourth grade class from what they saw. So it wasn't just 5 kids, it wasn't 10 kids, it was between 20 and 30 kids in the fourth grade that were drawing UFOs. How can you explain that? How can you explain that? It's said that a few of these drawings are hung up in the Roswell Museum today. So if any of you guys are in Roswell, New Mexico, go to the museum. I've never been, but I want to see these drawings and see what the hype is about. People don't realize the significance of this. And so it wasn't just the Reed family, it was multiple people. So what do you think about this? I mean, what about that hangar? Do you think that that whole town or a good section of those people all went into that ship the way the Reed family did? I've I've read a handful of reports that feature something like a hangar, something with several other worldly craft parked in them. Could these hangars be in the mountains or in outposts under the oceans, or maybe even being a part of some huge mothership in orbit, or even in the moon? Who knows? But what do you think? There are so many possibilities. There's so much places on Earth and in space that is unexplored by humanity that hangars could be anywhere, anywhere. This one is kind of funny story, but it's not that funny, but it's kind of funny. So a Reddit user by the name of Captain Call and his girlfriend had one of the strangest Valentine's Day ever. A lot of us want to have memorable Valentine's Day dates, right? In this case, they would never forget it. She was attending school several hours away, and the couple rarely got to see each other. Aw, long distance relationship. Always sad. And they planned to rent a hotel and spend the night together, right? Because it's Valentine's Day. At first, everything was fine. But when they went to sleep at around 11 p.m., things started to get weird. In the middle of the night, they woke up to see a strange light coming in through the window. There is usually no sunlight at 11 p.m. Where is that light coming from? He said it was kind of blue-gray, like early pre-dawn light, but the room was still fairly dark. So it was just coming out of the window. Slowly, the door to the hotel room swung open, revealing only one glowing light outside the door. It struck Captain Call as strange that there would only be one light on in the hotel's entire hallway. That sounds like a horror story right there. But then everything about that situation he had woken up to was strange. His girlfriend was screaming, and he felt unexplicably furious. Like he was like angry, heart slamming, fists clenched. He suddenly had the sense that something powerful was coming into the room. But when he woke up, he didn't see any of these things. The next day, his girlfriend said that she slept totally fine, doesn't remember screaming, and doesn't remember seeing her boyfriend super angry. Captain Call at first dismissed it as just a dream, some very, very bizarre dream. But now, years later, he is convinced something truly strange happened that night. And this story is not very specific. It is pretty vague because these two people are believing that this is a dream. So that leads me to the question, I wonder how many people have woken up with abduction dreams and they just dismiss them. Is that common? Are these dreams really memories, or are they just your imagination from watching a horror movie, right? Or some kind of scary documentary? I've never had that experience. I've never had like a dream like that or anything similar, but have you? Have you had something like that, either a dream or a true experience that maybe you can let us know in the live chat? Because how common is it? How common is having this kind of dream and then brushing it off? But in reality, it could have truly been a real abduction story. I I don't know what to say. Like, I'm dumbfounded. I don't know. This next one is pretty interesting. And this was right before the Betty and Barney Hill went famous. It was just a few years prior, and it's believed to be one of the first reported abduction stories. And this one is called The Alleged Alien Abduction of Antonio Villas Boas. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I hope so. So in 1954, two Brazilian teenagers claimed that they had found a UFO in the woods and were only able to escape with their lives after fighting off small, hairy aliens. Well, that's a weird start to the story. It's rare. It is rare in alien encounters that, one, you remember fighting off something, two, that you even have the power to fight off something, and three, that it's hairy. A lot of times in a lot of UFO encounters, they're like they don't have hair on their body, but in this case, these were small hairy aliens. Brazilian journalist Zhao Martin, I'm probably Zhao Martians, covered the alleged experience in 1957 and asked readers to send in their own. That's when he was contacted by farmer Antonio Villas Boas. Martian paid for the 23-year-old's travel expenses and put him up in Rio de Janeiro, where Boas could be examined. Boas claimed that he experienced an alien abduction one day after reading Martian's article chronicling the Brazilian incident, which seemed rather convenient. And something else that's somewhat popular is there are trigger words, or there are trigger stories, or trigger visuals that can help you remember something. So maybe before Boas, this farmer, had read the article, maybe he didn't have any memory, but once he read it by the journalist Martins, that's his name, there could have been a little click where he's then able to recollect what happened and talk about it to the journalist. So Boas said that he had been working nights in his family field in order to avoid the hot daytime temperatures. If we know in Brazil, it's a tropical country, it is hot. On October 16th, 1957, he allegedly said that he saw a red star above the fields near São Francisco de Sales. As it approached, Boas claimed that atop the egg-shaped craft was something like a disc shape containing a rotating red light. That's pretty specific for a guy like this, and we don't know how close he was to this object. But again, 1957, you don't really get any credibility for telling a story like this. If anything, which we're going to get into, is complete ridicule, especially in Latin America. So As the vessel extended its 3 legs on the earth, Boas claimed that he tried to flee, that he tried to run as fast as possible, but was captured by a 5 foot tall being wearing gray overalls and helmets that had been, and then he was taken aboard the ship. Boas alleged that the being's eyes were blue and small, and their communication consisted of animal like sounds. Have you heard of any other stories that are somewhat popular that communicate through animal like sounds, not through telepathy that we hear a lot about, but of actual something that you can hear? After blood was taken from his chin, Boas was placed into a room filled with a strange gas, which caused him to feel severely ill. Soon, a naked and attractive female entered the room. Boas claimed that the woman was adored with long blonde and red. So she had long blonde and red pubic hair, and it was that was soon to be engaged in intercourse. Afterwards, the woman gestured to her stomach and then motioned upwards, which Boas later interpreted to mean that she would raise their child in space. Boas claimed he felt angry and having been treated like a good stallion by these beings. So here we go with a story that's somewhat popular, right? Having hybrid children, but instead of taking the sperm or taking the eggs directly, he remembers having intercourse with this alien being. He was then taken off the ship and he watched it ascend back into the heavens. 4 hours had passed since his abduction. So he doesn't really remember what happened in those 4 hours, other than the fact that he had intercourse with a female extraterrestrial. What else could have happened? There could have been some kind of experiments. As I just mentioned, a little bit of blood was taken from his chin, which is a rather weird place to take blood. Is there a coincidence to that? I don't know much about it, but I find that a bit odd. So, Martin, the journalist, and the doctor that examined him believed that his story was completely fabricated. This was before the Betty and Barney Hill story. So there was absolutely no real documented encounters of being abducted and then being forced to have intercourse. Okay, this wasn't a thing yet. This wasn't a thing. So these guys were like, the story is absolute BS. There's no way. But then the doctor noticed signs that Boas had radiation sickness, such as nausea, bruising, burning sensations in his eye, and skin that was painful to touch. Boas later became a successful lawyer who created models of the UFO from his story in his spare time. So he remembered it, and in a way, he held it dear to his heart, I guess in a more dramatic way. But as we know through art or through poetry or through music, a lot of times it really can help with trauma. This is a really, really weird story. And when he died in 1991, he stuck to his story until he drew his last breath. And he said that this story really did happen. You know, the thing of that time period that it was supposedly taking place right in the mid 1950s was a time when UFOs being reported was just before the time that these sightings were reported internationally, right, through the international press. And of course, you had black and white alien invader movies at the time, but realistically, the population, especially the Latin American nations, the whole subject was either laughed at or seen as something demonic, because as we know in Latin America, it's a very, very heavy Catholic country. And it was shameful to mention. So Boas was not getting any fame or recognition or like anything positive from telling the story. he was ridiculed for it. And this was a story that really laid on the line. Even the fact that he was talking about intercourse with another being that wasn't human is even more ridiculous. Even crazier than the fact that she already knew that she was pregnant and going to go into the stars and raise their kid. Who would believe that story in that time? And who would believe that story today? What do you think? Do you think you would believe it? Do you think that you would really need evidence to be like, maybe, but still kind of BS? And this sexual side of this, of course, we have all heard of accounts where it seems some kind of like hybridization experiments is going on where female abductees have their eggs taken and men have sperm taken. But there's something else that is interesting here. If we go back in time, hundreds of years ago, there are stories of beings, creatures, and things labeled as demons being involved sexually with victims during the night. Who knows what I'm talking about? Because we're about to get into it. These are called succubus and incubus. At the time, really regarded as being demonic sexual entities and still believed to this day. Researchers on both sides of this debate agree that there are two possible explanations. Either the planet is actually being invaded by an alien race who wants to procreate with humans, or we are witnessing a widespread physiological phenomenon. Carl Sagan, for example, he's a very famous guy, believed that a more probable cause of alien breeding paranoia is, quote, the uneasy balance between sexual freedom and repression that has always characterized the human condition, and the fact that we live in a time fraught with numerous ghastly accounts, both true and false, of child sexual abuse. If you can tell from his standpoint, Sigmund Freud is a big influence to his ideology. So there seems to be some kind of agreement that stories including incubi, succubi, and vampires are all related to a common repression of sexual urges. But this is an approach that is not being used in the treatment of abductees, a treatment which employs support groups, repressed memory therapy, and hypnosis. What's your stance on that? Do you believe that a lot of these more medieval stories of incubus and succubus could be alien abductions, or are they a separate entity altogether, or are they even miscategorized and they could possibly be both, just depending on the story? They sound very similar, but in religion, they're classified somewhat different. What makes them different? That's my question. On that story, and looking back in history, there's a case of a little girl in 1645 who had an experience which in context easily fits into an alien abduction scenario. In 1645, in the 1600s altogether, we had Galileo, who sees the moons of Jupiter through his telescopes in 1610. And in 1664, this was when Isaac Newton's this is when Isaac Newton does experiments with gravity. So that's just a little preface of what's happening at this time period. Also, when witchcraft was still a thing and people still got burned for it. So in 1645, a Cornish teenager named Annie Jeffries was found unconscious. And when she was revived, right, when she woke up, she said that she had been assaulted by little men. She had been unable to move as they took her up into the castle in the air, right? Because this is 1645. People didn't have other kinds of terminology. So the fact that she called it a castle means that it probably looked nice. It was big, probably looked really expensive, and probably clean, right? There, sanitation was not a big thing in 1645. We know this. So the fact that she called it as a castle, meaning it had to be extravagant. Then she said that they molested her and then sent her back home. She referred to these men as fairies, right? Because they're small. And they continued to assault her regularly for a year until she was arrested for witchcraft. 1645, guys. Witchcraft was still a thing. People still got burned. And if you told a story like this, that like, yeah, uh, fairies came to my room, took me to their castle in the sky, and started molesting me. It sounds like witchcraft. It sounds demonic for those that don't know about aliens. I don't know about abductions, and people didn't at this time. So she was arrested for witchcraft for just telling the story of something horrible that happened to her. That's awful. That's absolutely disgusting and sad for a little girl like this, especially being punished for something that she didn't do. Reddit user Mr. Throwaway999, what a name, also saw Grays when he was just a young child, starting at around the age of 6 and continuing until his mid 30s. That's a pretty long time. And what we know about abduction cases is that it's not usually just one time you get abducted, it's on multiple occasions. And then sometimes it's even generations. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you're abducted more than once? Is it because they're harvesting something that they planted inside of you? Is it for your kids? Is it just to watch your lineage? There are a lot of possibilities, and no one really has the definite answer. So, for this Mr. I'm just going to call him Mr. Throwaway. At the age of 6, he woke up to see a gray standing in the room that he shared with his 2 other siblings. When the gray saw it had been seen, it ran from the room and then appeared to run through the closed door of its parents' bedroom. This already sounds like the movie E.T. just a little bit. I can imagine, this always sounds awful, but I can imagine like a cute little, like stubby little alien like waddling over to the other room, right? Because we went to its parents' room. When he went to the parents' room to see if the gray was still there, it had appeared to have disappeared. That's odd. Many similar encounters happened over the next few years, although he didn't really talk about it much because he was scared to get teased and he had no evidence and he was 9 years old. When you're 9 until you graduate high school, you just want to fit in. You don't want to stand out from other people. And if you told a story like this, you would get bullied from other people saying, "You're 9 years old and you still have imaginary friends. You're still scared of the dark." It's not going to help your character or your status in school. Although he didn't recall encountering the Greys during his teenage years, the Reddit user had a truly terrifying experience. And when he was 25 and living in a 3rd floor apartment. Here's when it's going to get weird. He awoke to find his bed surrounded by 4 or 5 small grays and 2 taller ones. That's weird. Usually, when you see multiple species, it's usually on a craft and not actually at home on Earth. So that's kind of interesting. And so a total of 6 or 7 beings who seemed to be performing some kind of operation. He couldn't move. Another very common factor, paralysis. The Greys seemed to communicate through some kind of clicking noise. Could have been like the animal noises mentioned in the previous story, or something completely different. Every once in a while, they would touch him with some kind of black rod, which would cause him to black out for 24 hours at a time. At one point, he woke up on his back porch with no memory of what had happened. This sounds like a classic case of missing time. Missing time is so common with many accounts of alleged alien abductions. The clicking sound for communication and the black rod, those are interesting details. And the fact that he could remember is also interesting. We're going through these stories so quick, and I'm so happy because these are such cool stories. These are awesome stories. Now, let's take a look at a really fascinating case and one that's still a huge mystery as the victim is still missing. It's the alleged UFO abduction of pilot Frederick Valennich. Valennich? While he was mid flight on his way to another airstrip. This already sounds like the Bermuda Triangle, but it's not. But kind of does sound like it. But here we go with the story. On October 21st, 1978, Australian pilot Frederick disappeared into thin air. It was during a 125 nautical mile training flight aboard his Kensa 182L over the Bass Strait between Tasmania and the Australian mainland that he confronted something bizarre. It's important to note that the 20-year-old was an enthusiast of alien stories and ufology at this time, but also a very experienced pilot. It says here at 7:06 p.m., while at 4,500 feet after departing to reach the King Island, Frederick reported that an unidentified craft was following him. Why would it follow him? We're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere, guys. Melbourne Flight Service insisted that there was no traffic near him, right? Because they can see it on their radar and they can see it through air traffic. But the pilot was adamant that a large vessel was trailing him. He explained that he had 4 bright lights and suddenly passed 1,000 feet above him at a remarkable speed. Also common in a lot of credible military incidences that have happened recently that have been dropped by the news. For 5 straight minutes, Frederick described its movements and shiny metallic exterior. Suddenly, he experienced engine trouble. Another common factor, right? When things aren't working. The Melbourne Flight Service asked him once again what the craft looked like. This is live right now. This is live, guys. Hello and welcome. Yes, Danny, we are live. He states to the Melbourne Flight Service that it's hovering and it's not an aircraft. Those were his final words. John, thank you so much. He says, very cool, Cristina. Hopefully you'll have the opportunity to talk to 2 government military officials about abductions, DNA enhancement, missing people events one day. Maybe possible after it's finally disclosed that some UFOs are non-human. I hope so. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much, John. You're always so kind to me. I really appreciate you. And sorry if I haven't been really reading the live chat, just because it is difficult for me to keep my train of thought and also read the live chat. So a really big way for if you have any questions or if you really want something to stand out, please send a super chat. It really helps my channel, but it also leads my focus to somewhere else without losing my train of thought too poorly, because I know I have a short attention span. And once I'm gone, it's hard to go back on track. With the story with Frederick, he said it's hovering and it's not an aircraft. Those were his final words. The last sound radio officials heard was a metallic scraping sound. Authorities presumed he had crashed, that he had completely crashed, but a later search of the area yielded nothing. He had vanished out of thin air. Okay? Not even the Australian Department of Transport could find answers. In 2014, however, new claims came to light. A UFO action group in Victoria alleged that an unidentified farmer observed a UFO nearly 90 feet in length hovering above his farm on the morning that followed Frederick's disappearance. More importantly, the farmer claimed that the pilot's plane was okay, so the farmer claimed that the pilot's plane was stuck to the UFO, leaking oil. This sounds like something out of Star Trek. The fact that this farmer was able to see that and to talk about it is really interesting. So while the farmer said, when he said that he scratched the airplane's registration number, like he tried to write it out on his tractor, he never came forward with it, claiming that the ridicule he'd received from his peers after telling him his tale had discouraged him. So he really tried to sketch this pilot's number. I don't know how close how close this plane had to be to the ground for this farmer to be able to sketch the situation, like sketch out the numbers, but apparently pretty close. But he never came out with it due to the ridicule, also the time period. Dan, thank you so much, says actual conspiracy. Those are not real books in the background. How did you know? How did you know, Dan? Shh. Keep my secret a secret. All my books are actually on my laptop. I don't have any books anymore. Zofa, thank you, says there's probably an alien museum filled with human pilots throughout history. They've collected, LOL, different stages of air travel. I wouldn't be surprised if humans can have museums, if humans can have zoos, right? Putting animals in cages. I do not see why other civilizations outside of Earth can't do the same thing. I don't see why not. This farmer and others, right? Because there was even an investigation on this case because it's so weird that a craft just vanished in thin air. Okay, so the lead investigator, George Simpson, was so frustrated. He's like, I need answers, because he's an investigator, right? They're full of curiosity and they're hunting for answers. He says, it's easy for some to dismiss, but we don't know what happened. We don't know what happened. He says, this was an experienced pilot who should have been able to identify another aircraft, but was clearly unable to. Like I had said, Frederick said that it was not an aircraft, but something unidentified. When it comes to these cases of people of credibility, pilots, military officials, they definitely hold a different kind of weight, right? Because these people are educated, they know what they're talking about, and the last thing they want is to tell a lie, because it does nothing for their career. In a lot of cases, it just makes their career go downhill. There is no reason, absolutely no reason, for people of credibility, people of status, to lie. And Frederick, he disappeared. He's gone. And he can never talk about the story until he's found, or maybe if a portal opens and he comes back to present day. Maybe he jumped into the past. We don't know. So many possibilities. And cases like this make me pause for thought. They make me want to step back and really think about it. I wonder about those who are missing and going missing every single year. This is a very, very common thing that happens around the globe. People go missing every single day and no one knows why. The statistics globally for missing people is absolutely crazy. It's sky high figures, and many are never found. There's an author who tracks a lot of these disappearances by the name of Dave Paulides, who writes the books Missing 411. How many of you have heard of Dave Paulides? I highly recommend you check out his video documentaries, his books, his interviews on Coast to Coast AM, and his YouTube channel. I'll be putting the links below for you to check out if you haven't heard of him or if you want to catch up with what he talks about. I recommend it. He is always covering disappearance stories. This is his job. This is what he does, and he also helps people to take the right precautions when going out to the forest or going anywhere in the wilderness. So he's taught me a lot personally through his videos, through his documentaries, and I don't want any of you guys to go and disappear. So please get educated and watch his stuff. I will put all the links in the description box below. The next case we're going to look at is the UFO abduction of Aubry and Debbie Huens from their childhood room. This story is a little popular, so if you've heard about it, then comment, but we're going to cover it right now. So Aubry and Debbie Huens not only claimed that aliens exist, but that alien abductions do too, and they experienced it. One of them says, Aubry says, quote, "I was probably about 5 years old or so, and a bright blue light came back into the room and the door would open, and there would be like a foggy kind of misty blue light just shimmering above the whole house, and those two figures would come in." Automatic, creepy story, creepy documentary. I can just visualize it while she's saying it, like seeing the whole situation happen. Though Aubry's first alien abduction allegedly occurred during childhood, she claimed these visitations continued while into adulthood. And like I mentioned already, you don't usually get abducted just once. It's on multiple occasions. Then she states, "We have been together on abductions," stated Aubry. She says, "We have been putting crafts and seen our house from above. So we realized that they are not from here. They are very good at mind erasing or whatever you want to call it. They leave you with bits and pieces of things that you can remember. Is that intentional or is that due to their faulty technology?" I'm going to go with the first one. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that they kind of want you to remember? Do you think maybe they're the ones pushing for disclosure instead of the government, right? And on Earth, maybe it's these aliens saying, we must educate them that we are real. I don't know. Debbie added, "I remember one time being on a spacecraft and standing there on the spaceship, and the floor and the walls disappeared. And I was staring at the Earth." Oh, that's pretty weird. Though the twins referred to these entities as the bald men, what they've described to people willing to listen closely resemble what ufologists have dubbed as alien greys, or simply the greys. Greys are alleged to be a type of extraterrestrial being that is human-like in form, gray colored, with enlarged eyes and a hairless head. We've seen it in a lot of movies and a lot of books. We've all heard of it. The twins said that they pleaded with their parents not to put them to bed for fear of the encounter. I would too. I would be horrified. I'll be like, "Mom, please don't make me go to sleep. Please sleep next to me, if anything, because I'm not ready. I'm not ready to sleep on my own." Because for a lot of us as kids, our parents are our protection. Our parents are the ones that take care of us, that love us. And if anyone bad comes by, they're going to be there. Zofa says, paradigm shifts. Have you read the book of Enoch? To me, that's one of the first abductions. I've read bits and pieces of it. Sorry, my contacts. I've read bits and pieces of it, but I have not read the entire book. Jack Ryan, hey girl. Hey Jack, good to see you. What's up? So these twins, begged their parents to not put them to bed in fear of the encounter of these bald men. But the adults simply dismissed these alien stories as to ruse to stay up late. And I don't know what happens when you become a parent or when you become a full-time adult. Please correct me for those that are watching that are parents, where you kind of lose your imagination in some respects and you don't really believe your kids. We know that kids are naturally more sensitive to a lot of things that are supernatural, things that sometimes adults can't see. And if we even watch kid cartoons, kid movies, it's always about the kids seeing things that adults can't. That's a very reoccurring theme in a lot of kid shows. And it seems to be somewhat accurate in real life as well, where parents just dismiss their kids' stories often, and that happened to me as well. So if you're a cool parent, all the power to you. The twins stated that when they were getting abducted, they started doing all kinds of experiments on us when we were just 12 years old. That was quote. While she was intentionally hesitant to come forward telling the story, Aubry claimed that after a non-human entity saved her from drowning in the ocean, she was inspired to dedicate her life to openly discussing her alien abduction experiences. That's a cool story. We know in some abductions that they probe you, that they take certain things from the body. But also, there are other stories that heal people, that heal people's illnesses, erase scars that they've had from surgery. So the fact that Aubry was saved from drowning by an extraterrestrial is interesting. But if we look in ancient times, could we believe that extraterrestrials or that angels were extraterrestrials, right? Because in a lot of stories in ancient times, and even in sometimes present day, when something miraculous happens, when something that shouldn't happen does happen for the better for a certain person, we say, oh, angels helped us. Or something that's somewhat physical but also kind of magical, can somewhat levitate, have all these magic powers, is an angel. What if it's actually an alien that just knows how to use 100% of their brain that we can't? We know as humans that we can only use about 10% of our brain. What if these entities can use a lot more than what we can? Neuroscientist Robert Davis, who was one of the first professionals to lend his support to the twins, explained that Aubry and Debbie experiences are shared by many of thousands, if not millions, worldwide. He says, it's unreasonable to think that they would all be lying or reporting dreams and fantasies, he said. These events are consistently reported and should be taken seriously by everyone in spite of their uniqueness. That's a great point. And even if these kids were lying, they are beautifully open. Well, I wouldn't say beautifully, but they're also opening up their curiosity, opening up their imagination that can create so much more for their future. And this is a big topic in ufology altogether. There's a lot of people that want to discredit certain famous, I don't want to say the word entities, but certain famous figures on Earth. Okay, and I'm not going to name names, but we quickly want to discredit them because we don't believe what they say. Regardless if they're lying or not, they're opening people's minds to certain topics, especially the UFO topic. So I'm not super picky with people. I shouldn't keep going. I should not keep going. Okay. It's gonna make me look bad. So this doctor, right? Let's go back to his name. Robert Davis is saying it is not healthy to reject kids or even your specific children to these encounters because these are common, these are popular, and they should be taken very seriously. With the story, bald men, I mean, children can give interesting descriptions, right? Like, I mean, they can only really talk about what they can interpret through their young knowledge and experience, not knowing anything about entities such as the Greys. So that also shows you that is it imagination? Can't be because they simply didn't have that kind of knowledge at the time. After those experiments, I mean, just how horrifying for them at a young age, even until adulthood, and yet such a common occurrence in many other abductee stories. Excuse me. There are a lot of people that don't handle the trauma well, and then there are those that come up with the truth, right? That they confront the truth and they're able to better reconcile what really happened to them. That's a big thing with hypnosis. We know that those that go through hypnosis are able to kind of label what happened to them versus being frustrated, full of anxiety, even PTSD, before having like solid memories. Once you have those memories, for many people, it is a little bit easier to reconcile how like why these how these things happen. Maybe not why, because a lot of people will never know why these things happened. Now I'm going to cover one more story before we end this live stream. The next story that I want to talk about is the alien story of Marine veteran Terrell that saw him abducted while napping. Okay, this is weird. This is weird. As a former United States Marine, Terrell isn't easily dismissed as an unreliable observer, and so his alien stories are perhaps harder to shake because again, these military officials have a we trust them because if they lie, it is not going to help their career. While maybe just just some regular Joe in the public, right? What are they called? I don't know, Bland Joe or something. It's different for them because they get the publicity, they get the fame, they can write books about it if they wanted to. But these military officials, they can't do that. Their job is on the line. And with this story, it's going to happen the same thing. So Terrell claimed that his first experience with aliens occurred in 2007 when he captured footage of what he believed to be a UFO on his cell phone from his apartment in Virginia. Back in 2007, iPhones were not really a thing yet, so you probably had a flip phone, maybe a BlackBerry, and we know that that resolution on that phone probably isn't very good. Oh, not very good. He says it was an orb of light, just a big ball of light, but it wasn't moving. One was solid white, the other was directly across the street from it, up 300 feet above the ground, and was changing colors very rapidly. What do these colors mean? You know, in a lot of abduction stories or even a lot of sightings, this is a very common thing that I don't understand. Of course, it's in a few movies, such as Fire in the Sky. No, Encounters. Sorry, I can't think of the movie right now, and it's so famous. But what makes me question is what do these colors mean when people are seeing flashing colors of these crafts? Is it communication? What does it mean? So Terrell claimed he recalled feeling as though something was wrong and that he wasn't supposed to be witnessing this appearance. But it wasn't until after he published the footage online that things truly became strange. Rebelliously curious. Yes, it is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Thank you so much for helping me out. it just slipped my mind because I'm reading this and I can't function two things at once. So thank you so much for covering me. Terrell quotes and says, I woke up from a nap by the sound of someone trying to enter my apartment. And I said, who is it? But there was no answer. You could see the doorknob moving and like a scratch at the door. And I keep a firearm. It was on my table, and my thought was to get up and go check what happened at the door. Despite the urge to get up, Terrell was paralyzed and was only able to move his eyes. Paralysis, yet again. Suddenly, he says that he heard a voice through the door to tell him, you don't need the weapon. We won't harm you. The incident certainly resembled the natural phenomenon known as sleep paralysis, which is experienced by many. But Terrell soon began to experience missing hours as well. He was incapable of accounting for 4 waking hours during the span of 2 nights. He says, when you see these objects and then do the research, you see that so many people have experienced the same thing as you. He also says, you have to say to yourself, maybe there is something to this. Maybe I'm not crazy. Terrell claimed that as soon as he started to keep a log of notes and sketch, his memory, have sketches from his memory, he would remember having episodes of missing time, and they began to resurface. He says, I was in a room and I saw a woman who did not have a complete human features. He says, she had the typical black eyes that you hear about. She had an elongated skull, and that startled me. And the next memory I have is me standing on my balcony waving at the cylinder-shaped craft. Like what? Like he was happy to say bye, or was he sad? I don't know. That's kind of a weird thing to even state. Like he remembers waving at this craft goodbye. Terrell's alien stories, which were eventually chronicled on the History Channel, remain both startling and unproven, as all alien abductions tales do, right? They're just eyewitness accounts. There's very little proof on if it really happened or not. In the end, however, Terrell said that his experience was for the best and has left him with desire to be a better person. This is somewhat of, in some cases, like maybe 50% of the time, this happens. When you get abducted by aliens or abducted by any kind of extraterrestrial entity, either you're horrified, it's very traumatic and it's awful, or the other option is they show you visions of Armageddon, right? Of an apocalypse, of needing to take care of the environment, which happened at the Zimbabwe school that was covered in the phenomenon by James Fox. And it just goes one of two ways. Either you want to be a better person, you have a mission given by these extraterrestrials to take care of the earth, take care of the human race, or you want to forget it altogether. You're just like, no, I never want to remember this ever again. Out of all of these stories, which one was your favorite? Which one do you think was the most realistic? And which one do you think was absolute BS that you're like, there's no way that could have happened? I want to know in the live chat. I want to know in the comments because there are a lot of stories out there. There are a lot of stories, and it is very hard to tell which ones are true, which ones are untrue. Of course, there is some evidence at times that can help with your story, with the encounter that you had, but in a lot of respects, there is just simply not enough evidence. I want to say thank you to everyone that watched this cast tonight. I know it was super late, but now it's going to be a new late show called Club Nocturnal, which will be coming up in later in July. I also want to thank all my Patreon supporters for helping me get this awesome mic and for supporting the channel altogether. Even though this is Mysteries with a History, always remember to keep your eyes on the skies.